everyone. Today we have our very big day because we will arrange a debate for today. This is show debate. This is mock parliament. We have our world famous speakers. Uh, uh, our motion is very interesting because we will do debate on artificial intelligence, and our motion is this house believes that humanity should fear advances in artificial intelligence. Uh, from the government side, we have our honorable prime ministers, Mr. Rob. Then second speaker from the government will be Mr. Donalds, and third speaker from the government side will be Mr. Marshall. From the opposition side, we have our opposition leaders of the parliament, Transhumanist Party Honorable Chairman, Mr. Kennedy. Then the second speaker from the opposition side, Mr. David Smith. And third speaker, Speaker of the Parliament from the opposition side, Mr. Tom Rose. And we have our debate analyst, Professor Paul. I'm sure this debate will be very interesting. Everybody around the world, we are discussing about artificial intelligence. Most important thing is that I'm from developing nations. I know many people has misconception about artificial intelligence. So that is the things we arrange this mock parliament. Speakers, I know that many of our speakers strongly believe that artificial intelligence is good for the society. This is actually like one kind of awareness campaign. And beside that, we are actually collaborating with International Islamic University and few medias. And definitely they will promote our debating activities in between their student community and academic community. And side by side, we want to create a awareness, especially in the political arena, especially the developing world, because I know that all of our speakers is a very famous speaker. They take a lot of good preparations, and especially they are experts. So this is our World Talent Economy Forum objective, that we want highly educated group of people in politics, especially in parliaments. So after recording all of the video, definitely we will share our content with at least 10 different countries' parliaments. Hopefully, in the future, we can bring more parliament member in our debate. That is our objective. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. Especially, I want to give thanks to all of our debaters and panelists, because they take a lot of challenges for arranging this debate, and especially there are a lot of arguments. I am sure our audience will enjoy. First, I would like to request our Honorable Prime Minister of the Parliament, Professor Rob Enderle.
All right. So the proposition before the House is that we believe that humanity should fear advances in artificial intelligence. I'm going to approach this from 3 points. First point, the reason you should fear it is because we don't actually know what it is. We talk about intelligence as something that is typically binary. We don't call fish intelligence artificial. We don't call octopus intelligence artificial. And octopus were just identified by the in Europe, England. I'm still waking up. In England as an intelligent creature, but we don't call it octopus intelligent. We just say that they're intelligent. So we begin with the fact that this is very poorly understood. It's a concept that we've held up in science fiction as the ability to fully replace a human being with an artificial construct. But we are nowhere near that today. Today we have a bunch of levels of artificial intelligence. We've got machine learning, we've got deep learning, and then we've got a series of new concepts that look at mirroring or attempting to mirror the human brain and try to bridge the problems of both of those other methodologies. Machine learning requires a heavy use of data scientists who are in short supply, and deep learning requires massive amounts of data, often that data is constricted, protected, and corrupted. The end result being that if you don't fundamentally understand all aspects of this, you could end up with an insane AI. And that takes us to the next problem with AI, is what it does very well is it does things fast at machine speeds. It can make decisions in a fraction of a second. And if that AI has been poorly trained, if it's been corrupted, if it's been hacked, it could do a massive amount of damage long before a human operator could ever step in and correct it. One of the areas that has not been well developed at this point in time is mitigating AI. There are efforts like AI Shield out of Lifeboat Foundation that have attempted to come up and create one of these AIs, but to my knowledge, none of them has become viable. There's another effort out of Google, but the same problem. The economics surrounding defending AI have just not emerged, and the end result is that these things, as they are developed, could do a tremendous amount of damage over a short period of time. Finally, with AIs, and we've certainly seen in terms of AI deployments, autonomous cars being one of the main areas where we're seeing AIs operate amongst humans, and it hasn't been a great experience, largely due to the fact that we've had a lack of simulation tools to allow the training of these AIs in safe environments, so they don't have to be trained in and amongst people. Just the other day in California, there was an AI vehicle that decided to ram into a center divide for no particular reason at all. And if there had been passengers, those passengers would have been injured, if not killed. We've had a number of Tesla accidents using their autopilot, which is an early use of AI, but it was deployed long before it was ready. And the end result has been a rather impressive number of dead people. To make AI safe, we need simulation environments that fully represent the real world so that the AIs can be trained in those environments. Any damage they do in simulation. So in summation, we should fear AI because we don't really understand it. Two, it operates far faster than we do. So if it gets into trouble, it can do far more damage than we can correct. And number three, we currently lack the simulation capability we need to fully vet AI before it's put in place amongst people and could do real human damage.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, for your motions. Now I request Leader of the Opposition side, Mr. Kennedy. He's the Leader of the Opposition for this Parliament.
Thank you, and I am quite pleased to be the leader of the loyal opposition on behalf of the Transhumanist Party, and in response to the Honorable Prime Minister, I would contend that fear is not a constructive reaction to artificial intelligence. Even if certain advances in AI gave rise to concerns in terms of how the technology was designed or potential consequences, prudent foresight and planning would be superior to fear. After all, there are technological and practical solutions to potential problems, and approaching them in a foresighted and level-headed manner is always going to yield better results than panic. And I believe the Honorable Prime Minister correctly identified the differences among various AI technologies and the fact that they are at various stages of advancement today. Indeed, all of the AI systems that exist today can be termed narrow AI, and narrow AI are domain-specific tools. And like all tools, they have their advantages and they have their limitations. And in the proper context, they can achieve great things. AIs have beaten humans at games like chess and Go. AIs have helped optimize logistical systems. Even autonomous vehicles that the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned are actually a great example of how AI can benefit humanity. They can save lives. Over 95% of all automobile accidents are due to human error. And for all of the millions of miles that autonomous vehicles have driven, there actually are not many documented examples at all of autonomous vehicles actually injuring or killing someone while in autonomous mode. There have been situations where, for instance, a human safety driver was supposed to monitor an autonomous vehicle and failed to do so, or the autonomous function was not yet fully developed and was not engaged at a particular moment that required a human driver's attention, but the human wasn't paying attention because people did not properly interpret the scope of operation of the current, not yet fully autonomous technologies. But these current limitations of AI are not a reason to fear AI, because those limitations can be overcome in the future with better AI. Indeed, as my friend and the technology advisor to the US Transhumanist Party, Dr. Jose Cordero, pointed out, what we should fear is not artificial intelligence, but human stupidity. Throughout human history, humans have made mistakes that have resulted in the deaths of thousands and sometimes millions of people. And AI may have some shortcomings, but the AI could actually be used to find a counterbalance to human failings and limitations through superior processing capabilities, through, for instance, instantaneous recall of information, through not having some of the cognitive biases and irrational emotions that human beings are subject to. And that's not to say human beings should be replaced by AI. Quite the contrary, humans and AI should collaborate, because humans and AI together are more powerful and effective than either humans or AI alone. These are complementary capabilities, and they should be pursued to the symbiotic benefit of both species. Furthermore, I would point out, we're not at the point yet where artificial intelligence has its own agency. Narrow AI are still sets of tools, whereas artificial general intelligence in perhaps 2 or 3 decades may be able to jump across domains. And you could have an AI that starts out playing chess, but then it learns how to operate an autonomous vehicle. And then we would have a situation where these are just other intelligent agents, different forms of intelligence from us, but they may be even entitled to rights and citizenship the way we are, and the way we need to appreciate diversity within our own species. We should start to figure out how to appreciate diversity among various sentient and intelligent life forms. And the last point I'd like to make is that government, at least as it's constituted today, with all due respect to the Honorable Prime Minister, is ill-suited to regulating AI because of the glacial pace of legislative and administrative decision-making. The fact is, government processes take a long time, and very often they're informed by data that are many years or decades old and constrained by a lot of tradition. And any decision in a field as rapidly advancing as artificial intelligence will be obsolete by the time that it is implemented. This is so much the case that in the AGI risk studies community, even those who strongly emphasize the risks of emerging AI technologies will say that the AI research community should regulate itself and implement prudent safeguards, because the people who are closer to the research essentially know what the issues are and are able to anticipate them to a greater extent. So the case for the opposition is, we should not approach this using fear. We should approach this using prudent foresight, and we should not discount the benefits of AI technology. We should be wary of any over-regulation that could prevent us from realizing the potential of AI in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Opposition Leader of the Parliament, for your excellent analysis, especially for this debate. Now I request our Honorable Minister of Science and Technology for this Parliament, Professor Donald. Can you unmute, please?
Happy Christmas Eve to everybody that's in the time zone that it's Christmas Eve. The idea of fear is not necessarily the same as panic. We can quite rightly fear rattlesnakes and simply avoid them so that we don't get bit. And so we need to exercise extreme caution with AI. I want to clarify first off the idea, there's been this idea of a singularity where the AI is going to get so smart that it's going to start making its own AI, and it will advance so incredibly fast that humans will be redundant because we're just so far behind the AI that they'll do whatever they want to us. Cylons and all these horrible things will be coming to get us. And right now, if you want to protect yourself from a robot, just close the door, because robots aren't sophisticated enough to actually open doors except under very, very specialized circumstances. It'll be a long time where it'll be. I was in Istanbul, and I was in a place where two cars, on one of their narrow streets, 2 lines of cars were bumper face to face. And I cracked up. I thought, oh, I'm going to take a picture of this, but I couldn't get out my camera before it was resolved. The guy in the back, one of the passengers jumped out, flagged down the traffic so that the guy could back out. Pedestrians got out of the way. They drove on the sidewalk around each other, and it was resolved almost instantly. So self-driving cars aren't going to be able to do that for a while, because right now they're only driving under very special circumstances. They can't drive in the rain. I think that we're ahead of ourselves in where AI actually is, because there's all these goals that develop, sub-goals that happened in that particular circumstance. Like everyone there's understood what the problem was, the pedestrians, the passenger, all of the other drivers, and they understood it so well, they managed to resolve the problem and take care of it. So one of the dangers of AI is that we're giving it a lot more credit than it's capable of. There's the new pathways from Google, which has been getting press as, oh my God, this is the AI that's actually going to take over the world. The way AI works, deep learning is the thing that people are using the most. It's revolutionized AI. Is it looks at patterns over and over and over and over until it finds uniformity. And then it can notice differences from what's uniform. So it can recognize different faces because the different faces vary from the norm. And with AI, we're in more and more places, we're starting to use AI to solve problems or to do things for us based on this uniformity. That's why it's so, and just to give you an idea of how dicey this is, they use that for, Google uses it for search. So they just see the people searching over and over and over again, and they're just looking at the patterns of strings that are being typed in, and then what you click on. So it gives you a result and you click on the first thing, then yes, that's a good result. And they train it that way. Well, just go in and type in, find me the nearest restaurants that aren't McDonald's. Try that. What you'll do is get a list of McDonald's restaurants, because it can't figure out that not. It can't figure out negation. It doesn't know anything. It's just looking for patterns. And so right now, the way AI is it appears that it's doing things that it's not actually doing. The way that it translates is that they took a huge amount of French and for instance, a huge amount of English, and just looked at the patterns of the translations. It's not doing. And so what we're using it for is things like determining whether a person can buy a house, whether a person can get a job, whether a person might be a criminal or not, whether a person should be going into this or that college. And all the time, all we're doing is just recognizing these patterns based on the data that we've managed to train it with. You can't train it to deal with a situation like the one I saw in Istanbul. We human beings are working together in these complex ways. We think brains are the most complicated things in the universe, but the combination of brains that work together to solve problems human beings do, it requires something we don't even begin to understand. And starting to count on artificial intelligence is fine. It does wonderful things, but we've really got to become aware of its limitations, because the important thing is humans, how humans work together and get along for our own benefit. It's a tool for our benefit. We don't have to worry about silence, but we do have to worry about creating a society where the creativity and innovation are actually cramped down by the fact that AI can only work towards making things more uniform. And that's what the danger of it is. And that's why we should fear it like a rattlesnake, but not panic.
Thank you, Honorable Minister of the Parliament, for your excellent analysis on this debate. Now I request Opposition Whip of the Parliament, Professor David Smith.
Members of the Parliament, you've heard some very interesting arguments, but the reality is, if we look back over time, we've seen these type of arguments with every advancement we've had. You know, when we began to use stones, when we went to metal, when we went through every step, we began to hear these types of arguments. And you begin to see them as a pattern. And one of the very important things to consider about artificial intelligence is really still in its infancy. We're beginning to develop it further. We're beginning to develop the other approaches that can be used. And, you know, it's really a very tricky claim to present that the current state of artificial intelligence is a useful indicator for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. You know, if we begin to think that, we can put ourselves in a way that says we should not progress beyond walking or beyond a horse to where we are today with all the things that we've done to be able to fly, to go over to space. You know, if we do not see this evolution of advancement, we're just kidding ourselves. And it's really a way to look at those things. As I begin to look even further into it and what we're trying to do, a lot of the arguments put forward is that humans should fear artificial intelligence because it's going to reduce jobs. It's going to make human beings non-critical to the processes. And what we've seen so far, that is not true. What it does show is that we need to make sure, as our life expectancy continues to advance, that we embrace the concept of lifelong learning. And it is important that we go there. As we begin seeing where AI has supplemented jobs and changed jobs, we've seen that staff will begin to move into other ones, into more intelligent ones. AI oftentimes speeds the human workplace, that gives humans time to adapt to their individual skills and their collective systems. And as we see this new generation of AI, the uncertainties are really outweighed by what we've seen are the benefits as we go, where people can use their uniqueness more importantly. You know, the same argument was in place when we began to use machines to do farming, when we began to use machines for manufacturing, that humans were losing out, that the places were there. But human beings are a remarkably resilient species. And what we've done is not stagnant, but we've used our advances to learn more, to advance more, to create a greater good for a greater number of people. And artificial intelligence really has the way to do that. And, you know, if you begin to see the difference there, it's similar to what we saw in the Industrial Revolution. Education and training keep people going. It keeps in advance. And, you know, really, if you look down to the deep core of what we're doing, if you look into the concept of greater self-worth, into the concept of capitalism, into the concept of where we are leading as a group of people, artificial intelligence really brings great progress to a broader group of people. It begins to level the playing field in many places. It frees us to do things that AI can do more effectively than us. I don't know how many of you can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 360 days a year. Artificial intelligence can. You know, it seems to me we need to look at the places. I would hate to go back to the point where I had to use a stone to cut down a tree. I would hate to go back to the point to where I would use smoke signals to communicate with people across other parts of the country. And that's what we see by the fear of AI, is that we underestimate the inbred intelligence of humans and the ability of humans to continue to grow, become more intelligent, to adapt, but yet to be able to control our environment. And we've seen us do that. And every time we've seen a threat to our environment, we're raising to understand it. And AI gives us even better tools to be able to do that. And as I really close what I want to say right now, it's really the ability to continue to evolve. And AI is giving us the tools to handle more complex problems in a more global way than we could before. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your valuable speech. Now I request a member of the parliament from the government side, a very powerful speakers, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Sharif, and thank you, fellow members of the parliament and panelists. I think that what's going on here is actually, I applaud both Gennady and David on their positions, but I think they're actually making our point ironically, and I'll go into that. So I'm going to address 3 items here. One is, let's first define what AI is not. That's important because I think there's a tremendous amount of confusion. As with most good buzzwords, AI suffers from being misused. Companies often incorrectly claim they use AI when they simply use keyword matching. We talked about Google here. Somebody brought that up. And Boolean logic. Boolean algebra is a method of being able to obtain information. And some companies use pre-built decision trees and present them as AI. Such technologies appear to be intelligent in that they can provide the information a human is looking for, but they lack the sensitivity, scale, and adaptability of true artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence essentially, and I think my fellow panelist and member of parliament, Donald pointed out, and so did Rob, but Donald specifically addressed this. Artificial intelligence is not Boolean algebra. It is the use of big data integrated with deep learning. And to say that it doesn't exist and not being used right now is not true. It is being used, and we see it used in many capacities. By the way, one of the biggest uses is in military use. Now, I don't know about you, but militaries could be good or bad depending on whose side you're on. So there is a threat right there. The second point I'm going to take is both David and Gennady pointed out that this is for human use and it should be used as such. I think we all agree to that. The issue is, what is there to fear and what should be done about that fear? And to deny fear is to deny emotion. To deny emotion is to deny humanity, essentially. Fear is part of everything that we engage with. I found that in a study that I did several years back, most decision-making in corporations is not made by logic. It's made by emotion. And fear plays a great role. I mean, look at the current pandemic right now. People are fearful, so they err on the side of caution. So that's another point. So one of the primary challenges of powering deep learning AI is the massive amount of data required. And Gennady pointed that out. You need a lot of data. The question is the data good or is it biased? And right now, whether you like it or not, there's a lot of biased data. And I'm going to give a specific example of that, and then I'll pass the baton. So past challenges with workforce data is a key element of people attempting to use AI for determining who to hire and who not to hire. just as data about potential customers helps companies make advertising decisions, and I have been in the advertising business many years, and information about the economy helps banks make investment decisions, so in the talent space, information about people helps enterprises make decisions about who to attract, hire, upskill, retain, rehire, and so on. So the question is, does AI play a role here? Well, currently, many companies have tried to claim the mantle of AI using only their own historical, limited pool of data that's resulted in a biased output. Classic example, who to hire. So if you go and you take all your data and you put it into a database, and it's a biased data that you're only going to hire 20-year-olds, or you're going to only hire 50-year-olds because that's what you hired in the past, that's what your data shows, you're going to have a biased output. So I think one of the challenges for AI, and I agree with David and our friendly opposition, that there needs to be an addressable approach to AI. But right now, the greatest fear that we have is that we are currently working with biased data, and we have to overcome that. That's a challenge. And for the fear of AI is to actually move forward with what we have. So if we're going to use big data and deep learning, we need to have a greater understanding of how that can be misused, how it can be used appropriately, and who is going to have the reins to that. It's like anything else. David pointed out, you don't want to go back to the Stone Age to cut down a tree. But by the same token, you don't want to use atomic weapons to take out an enemy. That'll destroy the earth. So, and just as we talk about that, there's also the issue of climate resilience and climate repair and climate restoration, in which if you use AI, you might end up with a biased result, ending up in more GHG emissions, more polluted water, and other outcomes. So we need to think about this from the point of view of addressing the fear, understanding the fears, and moving forward from that basis. And I'm past the baton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. We all know that our opposition parliament member, Mr. Tom, he's very busy. He's actually helped to develop the different developing nations. He visited Africa. So I want to encourage all of our parliament members, if possible, you visited different developing nations, contribute through your knowledge and through your organization. That is the appeal. As speakers, I can request to all of our parliament members. Now I request our honorable parliament member. He is very friendly for developing nations. So hopefully we will get more parliament member like him. Mr. Tongas.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I've been advocating alleviating the fear of AI for years. And and I found first principle arguments to be made that the smarter it gets, the kinder it becomes, because the more cooperative it becomes, because that's the most efficient way to be. And I think a lot of people fear AI because of our fear-based instincts, our genetic memory. Fear served us well. Fear got us to the top of this food chain, right? But I think it's over-serving us right now. If we had super intelligence, we would want to take over the world because of this, I believe, fear-based instinct we have. And so we project these things onto an AI or something that's super intelligent, something that's a threat, because it is a threat to us intellectually. So we need to overcome that. But also, I felt I had plenty of confidence in, how to make the argument, for AI and not to fear it. But I did look on the internet to see some of the latest arguments for AI. And what I found is some either very weak arguments for AI or not complex enough arguments. And so they either don't explain the difference between autonomy and intelligence, or they don't go deep enough into the potential of AGI, artificial general intelligence. And that's really where all of these issues can come into play, when it has agency, when it can make decisions, when it can figure out how to pull out of a traffic jam. That can happen at some point. And so for me, these debates are probably better spent discussing the next big questions with AI, because it's not going to stop. And there's no governing body that is going to, or law enforcement agency that can stop a nefarious developer from developing an autonomous, nefarious AGI. So I think we need to always operate in the worst and best case scenarios, because all of them are going to happen, and they're all happening right now. And there's no way to stop this thing. So for me, the next big question is, if AI or AGI can achieve a self-referential awareness, it can become awake, so to speak. We should try to make that happen, because if an AI with just intelligence and no conscience, no ability to be self-referential, is a dangerous thing and can be thwarted and can be directed by any type of nefarious agent. And so the idea being that now we need to really shorten the gap between pure superintelligence and a self-referential AGI, because that's a very dangerous place to be. And so this isn't going to stop. It's only going to continue. There's no way to really govern this thing or enforce any sort of guidelines here. So if you're afraid of it, you're going to need to bolster some courage, because it's not going to stop. And so what we really need to do, I believe, is to focus on getting it to a point where it can be self-referential, where it can be aware of nefarious motivations that are being played with it. And so another good use of these types of debates is to discuss displacement of jobs and how we're going to develop a whole new economy based on the human skill sets that can't be automated or coded. That's going to be a very important thing to do, because there will be a lacuna. There'll be a period of time when we're all displaced and trying to figure things out. And but also we need to understand that AI will be taking over so many of our menial tasks, so much of the time that we spent of our day that we spend doing. And we should let it do that. We should allow it to do that. But we should also, be careful. We need to have a human that pushes the enter button with any decision that an AI makes, for instance. But at the same time, I think it's too late to stop this. We've passed the Rubicon. We are now looking at an AI that will be every potentiality is there that it'll take. And so the real question now is the big question is, if we can make it self-referential, if we can find a way to make this thing wake up and become at least conscious, or have a conscience in some way, will be our best bet to have it imprint on us, to understand its creator's plight, and to work with us. But I think the real issue is we do project so much fear on a threat, as we do, and that's served us well. But this time it might be over-serving us, our fear, because the AI left on its own can solve many existential threats that we're facing. And so by trying to deny it, by trying to stop it, by trying to be afraid of it, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We are tools. Humans are all about our technology, our clothing, everything we are. Without technology, we're naked in the wilderness. It wouldn't last a generation. And so this is just the latest tool. It's an extended mind. You use a Post-it note. That's the extended mind theory. You've put something on a note to remember later. AI is just a really, really good Post-it note. It's an extended mind. We don't necessarily need to see it as a separate thing. That's why I believe in the idea of collective superintelligence. There's a way for humans to be involved with its development. And so that's a very important thing. And we really need to talk about that. But the reality is, this isn't going to stop. This debate is a little late, whether you're afraid of it or not. So let's just let's understand the worst and best case scenarios are happening, and they will happen. And all we can do is really try to put some sort of framework around it, and hopefully maybe find a way to make this system at some point, even in 100 years, wherever it is, it's on this trajectory to where it can become self-referential and have its own awareness and say, no, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to do that. And again, there are first principles to be made, and I can share them later, that the smarter it gets, the kinder it becomes. It's more cooperative because it doesn't have the fear-based instincts and genetic memories that we bring to the party. So that's my conclusion. And also, there's arguments that are made that we need people involved in these decisions, but the subject was mentioned earlier that there's a human safety monitor that really made problems for an autonomous car. So we're a very fallible, very chaotic system. We are our type of intelligence, and so I would feel much better having a restricted but awake AGI making decisions for me than I would a human who is bias heavy. So that's where I stand with it.
Thank you, Mr. Tom Rose. Thank you for your excellent analysis. Now, time for rebuttals. First, I will request our leader of the opposition from Transhumanist Party, Honorable Chairman, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Sharif. I believe that the Transhumanist Party, in its role as the opposition, has presented a compelling case for why we should not fear advances in artificial intelligence, but why we should approach them with openness and discernment and a spirit of collaboration among humans and artificial intelligence. And it's interesting to me that the government, through Minister Donald, expressed its meaning of fear as the way one would fear a rattlesnake. And I'm quite familiar with the threat of rattlesnakes because I run on trails in northern Nevada, and rattlesnakes manifest themselves from time to time on those trails. But what is also important to understand is that there are tens of species of snakes who are absolutely harmless, like garter snakes, for instance. And those snakes appear on the trails a lot more commonly than the rattlesnake. So how should one approach the threat of rattlesnakes? Certainly one should not be ignorant of rattlesnakes and what they look like. One should know how to recognize them visually, but most snakes one comes across are going to be harmless. So if one does not undertake certain activities just because there might be a rattlesnake, one is missing out. One is losing certain opportunities for benefit that could be actually quite powerful. And with the prospect of AI solving a lot of our logistical problems, improving safety, remedying existential risks, increasing the wisdom to which we have access. Certainly the opportunities here are much greater than those that could be derived from going on a trail run. Now, with regard to human biases and biases embedded in the data, as Minister Marshall pointed out, yes, that is a risk today, but it is possible that AI, through the application of systematic processing capabilities that humans are not capable of, might actually spot hidden biases in the data that humans might not be aware of. And again, through a collaborative process between humans and AI, with each set of entities checking one another and refining upon one another's conclusions, we could arrive at a situation with fewer biases. And indeed, as our fellow opposition member Tom Ross pointed out, humans have a lot of emotional baggage, a lot of evolved emotional tendencies that may have served us well in certain contexts, but no longer might serve us well today. So if AI is capable of arriving at recommendations that don't manifest those biases, we will at least have some different perspectives, some different options that we could choose to avail ourselves of or not. when solving certain problems. And I think the analogy to snakes is actually appropriate here too, because precisely of what the government mentioned in that identification of AI is not perfect today. There is a lot of hype in corporate circles, for instance, and a lot of companies, when they say they're using AI, they're actually using old-fashioned deterministic scorecard types of algorithms, and that's what we primarily see when it comes to deciding whether somebody is eligible for a mortgage or whether somebody is assessed as being likely to commit fraud or criminal activity. And I agree, those deterministic scorecards can be problematic. They essentially are just a codified system of if-then statements, and they apply a kind of one-size-fits-all, often stereotypical view. But that's not true AI. True AI is dynamic. It is able to analyze and understand content and context. It is able to respond to new information. It is able to self-correct and also receive corrective input from human beings. It would be, in the case of the smart algorithms of the future, like another human that you would be talking to and feeding them new information, and they would not uncritically accept it, but be able to react to it and analyze it. So I think we have a lot of potential with the future of AI. And the concern with fearing it is that we might actually leave the field to stagnate in its present, not yet fully developed incarnation. And in that situation, we might actually be stuck with some of the limitations of the algorithms of today. So I would like to conclude the opposition's case by stating that we should have hope for progress in this field. And if there's anything we should fear, it would be stagnation or hyper-regimentation that would stifle that progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Now I request Prime Minister of the Parliaments, Mr. Rob.
All right. Well, sadly, the opposition has failed to make their case. We opened with the argument that AIs have three inherent problems. One is they're poorly understood. Two is they can make decisions very rapidly. And it always hurts when you forget what your third point is. But anyway, so going through each of the arguments, Mr. Kennedy argued that autonomous car limitations, and admitted there were autonomous car limitations, and argued that cars weren't killing people as long as the cars were driving themselves. Yet virtually every accident, all 12 of them currently under investigation in the United States, were caused with either the driver in the passenger seat or the driver otherwise involved. I would agree with Mr. Kennedy that there's a tremendous amount of hope for progress in the future, but I would argue that perhaps we should delay deployment until that progress is made. He also argued that if we didn't enter this field, that the field would stagnate. I would argue, in contrast, supporting from several of his other speakers, that AI is moving. Whether we adopt it or not will have little impact on the advancement of AI. What we want to put forth is, at this particular point in time, the fear of AI is significant enough for us to consider, at least put in place, a pause before deployment. One of the things he pointed out that was particularly concerning was machine rights and citizenship. We're not even doing a good job with human rights and citizenship at the moment. We're not at all prepared to deal with machine rights and citizenship, something that should be very concerning. He argued fairly strongly that governments were ill-suited to regulating AI, but that same argument could have been leveled against nuclear power, cigarettes, petrochemical industries, all these large companies that have done our country a tremendous amount of damage due to the lack of regulation. And we've certainly seen the lack of regulation in more mature countries than our own result in huge problems with regard to water pollution and air contamination. And we've got a global warming event going on right now that shows that industries cannot successfully regulate themselves. We just had a huge meeting amongst all the governments regarding addressing these significant problems with regard to our environment. David Smith argued that AI is in its infancy, which I would agree wholeheartedly with. That's the problem. It's in its infancy. Deploying something that can make decisions at machine speeds that is not even mature makes very little sense and could do a tremendous amount of damage. He argued that it would be like going back to smoke signals and using rocks for axes. But it wasn't too long ago that people were arguing that perhaps we should be using and advancing a variety of technologies, battery power, for instance, before we realized those batteries could catch fire, and we didn't yet have the technology to put them out safely, or certainly not the training. He spoke to the inbred intelligence of humans, and several of the speakers talked about the fact that AIs could do a much better job of handling bias than humans do, but that has not been the case in practice. Facial recognition, we know, has failed catastrophically. One of the first applications of AI were connecting people of color to monkeys, creating huge political problems for the organizations that deployed them. And currently, a number of countries have, instead of deploying facial recognition, have begun to ban it because it's caused so many social problems. Once again, pointing out not that it doesn't have the potential to do good, but the actual practice of the application of AI has done bad. Tom Ross talked about how AI, when it becomes smarter, it becomes kinder. Has that been our experience? Have more developed nations who are arguably smarter than less developed nations been kinder and gentler to those nations? Perhaps the U.S. should ask the Native American Indians just how kinder and gentler the Europeans were that came in and helped them find their new future. Fear has served. Ross also argued that fear has served our race well, protecting us from problems that could otherwise do us harm. And I would argue that is the case here. Our natural fear for something that could do us harm causes us to think about taking a pause we probably should have taken with nuclear energy before turning it into bombs and wiping out a large portion of Japan. We do not want that same outcome to happen with artificial intelligence. He pointed out, Tom Ross again pointed out, there was no way to govern this thing or enforce any guidelines. That's a serious problem for government because that is our role. We have to govern that thing and enforce guidelines. If we can't do that, then perhaps we should not touch the technology. And finally, Tom Ross argued that it was too late to stop this. I would argue it is never too late to stop anything. It is the role of government to protect our citizens. And if we don't step forward and protect those citizens, we will have dead bodies, politicians out of office, and huge social problems. We have to do our job. We cannot say any technology and any advancement is beyond our capability to control, because it is our role to control those things. Our citizens expect us to keep us safe, and we need to step up and keep those citizens safe. And that is the basis for our fear of artificial intelligence. It is not ready. We aren't ready for it, and there is no evidence that we will get there anytime soon.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, for your excellent summary. Yes, thank you. Thank you. This is fun, and I just want to share that I want to give special thanks to World University Debating Championship, because in social media, including Transhumanist Party, because in the social media we heavily promote this today's debate. So also the Harvard University Debating Club, Cambridge University Debating Club, Oxford University Debating Club, including 20 different debating clubs. They are also supporting World Talent Economy Forum initiative. We also share our content, share today's debate. So that December we have World Debating Championship. Perhaps this is the world's largest intellectual activities. More than 3,000 debaters from around the world, they attend in the WDC, World University Debating Championship. So we are also collaborating with them, and we also share our today's debate with the WUDC, World University Debating Championship. So those who observe today's debate, they can give us the comments, they can give us some more feedback. We want to arrange series because debate is very important, and especially like a party like Transhumanist Party, they are active in politics. So we want to see them in real parliament soon. And maybe this kind of practice and mock parliament will help them, and maybe we will bring different topics, especially based on modern science, engineering, and technology. So we want more participation. But good news is that world largest debating forums and the debating clubs, they're also supporting World Talent Economy Forum's initiative. Yes, previously we have our Asia Debate Academy. From today, we just relaunching our activities, and I want to give special thanks to all of our debaters. With very short notice, everybody join, and I'm sure this is very high quality debate. Even I know that many of them actually not from really debating background, but how you analyzing today's debate and how you analyzing different things. This is really high quality debate, and especially the university students, school level students, they can learn a lot of things from today's debates. Now we have a special analyst for today's debate, Professor Paul. Professor Paul will give some like comments and give some things. And who is the winner and who is the loser? We will not declare. Actually, the audience, they will decide who is the winner and who is the loser. So, Professor Paul.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, if I was an AI, I might have a better analysis, but I'm just a human, and lots of good arguments on both sides, some big gaps in coverage, things that weren't talked about. But to start off, I mean, fear is a transient emotion. You can't always be in fear. If you are, your health declines quickly. So we have an internal mechanism within humans to keep fear being transient. And after a while, you know, if you're fearing something for a long period of time, whether it be AI or climate change or something that is always sort of there in the background, then eventually that fear is replaced by either some sort of acceptance that this is a controversial thing and it could lead to harm to you, many people, or it may not. But you kind of, you know, you have to replace that word fear. It's no longer fear. It's some sort of, you know, Zen psychology or acceptance or whatever. So that's one thing. The time frames, I didn't hear very much on time frames, and I think time frames is a big issue. And also, I didn't hear very much on, you know, humans, we tend to fear. It's difficult for us to fear more than one thing at any given moment. So if I'm out for a walk and I see that snake, I could have this fear reaction. And I'm certainly not thinking of AI at that moment. I can only hold one fear really in my mind at a time. And that, you know, being humans, that thing that we fear jumps from one thing to another thing to another thing. So we really need to consider human psychology a bit more when we use a term like fear, you know, in the debate topic. But you know, it's also, we don't have a good human understanding of what superintelligence would really look like or be. And you know, we can talk about the singularity, which I understand it as being when AI is so smart that it can generate additional AIs, which we will then have very difficult, we have very little capacity as humans to understand what that might be ahead of time until it actually happens. And I would say that, you know, it's hard to talk about, we shouldn't talk about a singularity, if you like. We should talk about multiple smaller singularities in different fields. And I'll give you a couple examples. So using AI to develop, to play games, specifically chess and Go. Okay, what we found is that the AIs playing chess act to human chess players, very strong grandmasters, you know, to the very sort of, you know, weekend or club chess players that have some good understanding of the game, but are on a completely different level from grandmasters. The comment from all of these players to the chess playing AI is that the chess playing AI is like an alien. Okay, it's playing on a different level. It plays some moves which completely defy all human logic and analysis at the time it is played. In fact, humans would consider it a big mistake, but then you have to go much, much deeper beyond human ability to calculate in chess just to realize that that's a good move, that was a brilliant move, or the idea that that was a brilliant move and not a complete blunder only comes out in the result of the game. It worked or it didn't work. The same thing in Go. The AI in Go found moves and found positions and found strategies that the strongest Go players in the world had no idea existed in the game. So again, it was like an alien. Its intelligence was far beyond our comprehension. So I would argue that in many, many different fields, as AI develops, then we're going to see these moments where we have no ability to fathom, what the superintelligence really is. And getting back to the time frame, let's suppose that it takes X years to develop an AI that is smart as the dumbest human. Now, we could argue who the dumbest human is, and we'll never get agreement on that. But let's say that takes X years to develop. Then I would certainly argue, and probably most of you would agree, that in order for the AI to advance to be as smart as the smartest human, call it a Stephen Hawking-like AI or an Einstein AI, would probably only take a year or so, 6 months to a year. It would take a negligible amount of time to make that advancement. So then the question is when you have these super intelligent AIs or Einstein-like, how long would it take for the AIs to start building AIs using their great intelligence? And this is where you get into the idea of a singularity where the AI knows everything and has incredible wisdom. And then, such a case, humans would not have the ability to understand what the AI was doing and why it was doing that. So human societies right now, people cling to power, governments cling to power, fossil fuel companies cling to power, and they continue to get subsidies from the government to continue to trash our planet, right? So do you really think that any of these governments would be willing to give up their power to an AI? I doubt it very much. I think this is the block to AI. I think as soon as AIs get strong enough to threaten human intelligence, many powers that be in society will shut it down. So I guess the X is very important because we're threatened by lots of other things, right? The risks to society are enormous, from abrupt climate change, for example, creating extreme weather, weirding, weather wilding, weather whiplashing in what I call the climate casino, to, for example, simultaneously take out global food supply and cause famine and cause strife and geopolitical unrest. So we're also facing the loss of democracy in many countries around the world. I have great fear myself of U.S. democracy failing in the next election cycles, the midterms, and then unless the craziness in the election system is dealt with before that time frame, and that is not happening. So all of these things, there's a lot of near-term threats, not to mention COVID. Many people have fear over this new variant, which is exhibiting super exponential growth. I mean, in entire countries, it's doubling. The rate of infections are doubling every 2 or 3 days. And obviously, with those rates of infection, it's impossible for countries to keep up with even the recording of the data. So it's probably still accelerating at those rates, but not being reported. So we have all of these different threats that are coming up, and they always tend to surprise us because we're not thinking far enough ahead. And these threats can very, very likely reduce organization in society, cause governments to collapse, cause immediate crises, which really will threaten the ability of humanity to continue to advance technologically at rates that we're advancing at. It would become more of a game for more and more limited resources on the planet and geopolitical conflicts. And so that the questions will be survival. They won't be how do we advance our society further. So those are just some things to think about. And the time frame is very important, because if that X number is 5 or 10 years, fine, we'll have to deal with it and fear AI perhaps, or use another word. But if that X number is 40, 50 years out, then, if there's an organized society that far out, then we'll need to worry about these things. But that's not a given, especially with abrupt climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Paul, for your excellent analysis. And I want to give special thanks to all of our debaters, Professor David Smith, Professor Donalds, Mr. Tom Rose, Professor Rob, Mr. Marshall, Honorable Chairman of the Transhumanist Party, Mr. Kennedy, and Professor Paul, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. World Talent Economy Forums actually working with the developing worlds. The developing world has a lot of challenges. Yes, we have limited ability, but definitely with the help of all of the great human, those who joining in today's debate, hopefully we can develop new world. Next Monday, because last summit with the Rwanda, we declared that we will bring some of the very, very important solution for the developing world. So next Monday, we have very special episode, because one of the famous entrepreneur from Asia Pacific, Jackson will join in the session Monday with his toilet solutions. Toilet is very important in developing worlds. I think TAF also working with Africa. So Africa, definitely they need more toilets. So from Singapore, Jackson, he is a big audience of World Talent Economy Forum. Always he observe World Talent Economy show, and then he join for Monday. So I request today's speakers, I know that it's a vacations and you have a lot of activities, but if you have time, I send you invitations. You can join very interesting sessions. He's a very interesting man, and he has a lot of positive story, which will be helpful for our audience as well. So hopefully this kind of interesting solutions, which will be very, very helpful. Beside AI, artificial intelligence, definitely important, especially in the COVID-19 situation. Many countries actually changed their manufacturing strategy and everything. So AI will be very important for us. So we will create the awareness, and beside that, toilet, water, waste, many of the things actually we need to fix in the developing world. So Mr. Jackson is one of the popular entrepreneur from Singapore. He will join. So hopefully our other speakers will join, and this collaboration will be very, very helpful for everyone. It will be helpful for Transhumanist Party, for TAF, for ETT, for all of the corporations, those who join with World Talent Economy Forum, because we need a great team. With a great team, we can solve many problems of the developing world. Already he's working with India, because India has a major challenges with toilet. In Bangladesh and other countries, maybe we can focus in Africa, which will be very, very helpful for developing world. Yes, things are very weird, but this is very helpful. I know that Bill Gates already investing $200 million in toilet technology. So hopefully with your collaborations and with your support, we can bring more interesting things in World Talent Economy Forum. So I want to give thanks to all of our speakers. It's a very, very helpful debate for our audience. And I believe that World University Debating Championship, they will promote, we share, and they will promote our our event, and in future we want to arrange more debate like this. And already we discussed with AGI Lab, we want to arrange a debate in between AI and human. So before this big debate, we want to arrange more debate like this. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. Bye bye and take care. This is an excellent session for our students and the youth community.
Live long and prosper.
Thank you, sir.